And this is what also is interesting about another player and another team with Chris Paul and the Suns, because Chris Paul also declined the final year of his of his contract and of his player option with the Phoenix Suns, worth $44.2 million, and he declined it. Now, here's the interesting thing about Chris Paul and the Phoenix Suns. The Phoenix Suns are obviously optimistic that they can renegotiate another contract with him. It appears, by all accounts, that Chris Paul would prefer to stay in Phoenix. But I just talked about leverage with Kawhi and the Clippers. And leverage is important. There's no question about that. But there's one other superlative that's vital to NBA teams and specifically to owners in all major sports and in particular the NBA, and that's relevancy. If you're not winning, you want to be relevant. Jerry Jones with the Dallas Cowboys, since the Tony Romo days and beyond, his focus hasn't been on winning. His focus has been on the team and making the team relevant. Then all of a sudden this year, he had a change of tone. Why? Because he realized and came to his senses that, hey, you know what? I'm getting up in age. What I want to prioritize is winning a Super Bowl more so than just having a relevant and glamorous franchise. And so he was willing to bite his tongue and swallow his mouth and sign some of his key guys, some of the key cogs in the machine that he thought were integral pieces to their team's success. He was willing to overpay them to retain them. Ezekiel Elliott, Dak Prescott. Not to suggest that those guys don't deserve that money, because they do. But sometimes the owner has to be willing to fall on the sword when it comes to the finances and not be so frugal. And there was an interesting article that was written just earlier this year in March by the Tactician that noted and chronicled the most parsimonious and stingy NBA franchises in the last decade, spanning 10 years. And the team that finished second lowest on that mark out of 30 NBA teams, basically ranking 29th, just ahead of the Portland Trailblazers, was the Phoenix Suns. Was the Phoenix Suns and owner Robert Sarver. This is a guy who has notoriously been frugal with his money. He's been a bit parsimonious. This is a guy who, since he's bought the team in 2004, has been adamant about his refusal to pay the luxury tax. Since the Phoenix Suns drafted Steve Nash in 2004, they weren't willing to spend a dime. They were nickel and diming guys. And now you've got an opportunity with a player in Chris Paul. Say what you want about his age. Say what you want about what stage in his career he's at. This is a guy that led the Phoenix Suns to their first NBA finals since 1993, their first playoff appearance in over a decade, since 2010. And when I think about Chris Paul and his other potential options, now that the Lakers have reportedly acquired Russell Westbrook, the Lakers are off the market, which was a potential suitor for him. But outside of Phoenix, there's only a few couple potential realistic options. You've got the Knicks, you've got the Heat, who appear set on Kyle Lowry, you've got the Celtics, and you've got the Mavericks. Those are really, and the 76ers, those are really the only teams that could potentially be out there for Chris Paul. And if you look at all of those options, the Knicks have to gut their entire team just to acquire him. And now you've got a future of Chris Paul and Julius Randle. He's not going to want to go there. The Boston Celtics are extremely thin when it comes to their depth and their bench, which is one of the characteristics that made the Phoenix Suns such a formidable group. Is that depth? Was that depth this year? So you'd have to get rid of Jason Tatum and whoever else you would have to get rid of to make that work. Jaylen Brown, rather, not Jason Tatum. So now you have Jason Tatum and Chris Paul moving forward. That's not good enough. And his dogged and stubborn personality wouldn't work with the Mavericks and Luka Doncic. So that's out. The 76ers would actually be a great fit. I was just talking about this with some of my friends yesterday. The 76ers would be a great fit for Chris Paul and Joel Embiid and Tobias Harris and Doc Rivers again and Seth Curry and that team. But Daryl Morey would never in a million years trade a young Ben Simmons, who he views as a superstar, for an aging Chris Paul. That wouldn't happen. And then you're left with the Heat, who would also be a good fit, but they appear set on Kyle Lowry, trying to make a trade work with him. So the Phoenix Suns are the most viable option for Chris Paul, and he clearly wants to be there. And so the onus shifts to Robert Sarver, because at the end of the day, he has to be willing to bite his tongue and write a check to Chris Paul for 3 years in the $100 million range, because that's going to be the deal that he's requiring and that he's looking for at this point in his career. Perhaps you can distribute the money so that the bulk of the money in the contract comes within the first 2 years as opposed to the last 2. And you just swallow your pride and you say, hey, you know what? This is one of those rare instances where we actually had a tremendous season. This guy was instrumental in leading us, and we've never been more relevant in the NBA than right now. And again, as I alluded to with the Clippers, your leadership and where you stand amongst the rest of the teams in the NBA is such an ephemeral thing. It does not last a long time, and the West is getting much more difficult. The Golden State Warriors are not done this offseason. I'm sure they're primed to make a move. The Lakers have retooled, and so the West is not going to be easy. And if you're the Phoenix Suns, you're Robert Sarver. Do what you need to do. The man's earned it. He deserves it. I know the NBA is not about paying guys for what they've done. It's about what you think they will do. But this is one of those instances where it does not matter. Sign him to the 3-year, $100 million or $90+ million deal that he wants, that he's looking for, and just bite your tongue and move on. Because without him, we've seen what this Phoenix Suns team is. And don't get me wrong, Devin Booker is a budding superstar. He's fantastic. He's only going to ascend. DeAndre Ayton's only going to get better. Cam Johnson and Mikal Bridges took major strides this year. They're going to come back next year with a lot more confidence. Cameron Payne is a viable backup point guard, perhaps with a larger role. He can also continue to elevate his game, but we've seen what this team is without Chris Paul. And I like Jay Crowder as well, who will still be around, but this team isn't going to be a realistic Western Conference Finals caliber team without Chris Paul. I don't even know if they're a Western Conference caliber team with Chris Paul this year. So do what you need to do. Remain relevant if you want a realistic shot, and just sign him to the contract and don't look back.